Red bulb, blue bulb, red bulb, blue bulb. We used to do that
Red
before.
bulb, blue bulb, red bulb, blue.
Red bulb, blue bulb,
Red bulb, blue, blue, blue.
On this episode, we are going to talk about ego. Our ego. We're going to talk about recognizing ego in ourselves, with the things we say, with the things we do, the decisions we make, the way we think, maybe as well. This will be very interesting for me as well. I think I'm going to find out some things that might be ego-driven. Kind of nervous about that, but I have to keep my ego aside and explore this. We have a guest today, Deepali Kumar. Deepali Kumar, you are a yoga instructor.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Exciting.
Okay, you wanna go through very quickly how you guys met? You and Manar.
Manar and I met because we wanted to delve more into our yoga practice. So that's how it started.
Yeah.
I've been teaching for about 5 years now, so I'm very happy to share whatever I've learned about yoga, and it just happened by chance. We've had common friends for the longest time, but we never had a chance to meet. But we've had a very strong connection, a lot of things that we often agree on. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah. She's been a big part of my journey, although it was few classes, but they made a huge change.
Just before getting into this, let's define ego. I believe we have different definitions, just according to our previous discussions. Anybody want to start with the definition?
Don't look at me.
اليوم قدامي اليوم سهل.
I always go first. You
Okay.
always go.
Okay. My definition of ego comes from Eckhart Tolle. So he identifies it as identification with thought. So basically, everything that we do starts with a thought. And when we are identified with a thought, so when we identify ourselves with a thought of whatever that we don't take basically to the afterlife is ego. It comes from ego. So whatever that doesn't matter, how rich you are, how poor you are, how beautiful you are, how ugly you are, your position, your race, your nationality, your name, your family. If you're attached to any of that, if you feel like you're not yourself without those things, that's ego.
That's a good definition. Deepali?
For me, I have a very complex idea of what the ego really is. Sometimes I think of it as a facade that we put in front of a lot of other people. If you're looking at it because I like to look at it from a psychological point of view. And I think ego is a relationship that we have with our environment, the people that we're surrounded with, and ourselves. So in so many ways, what happens is that you have a face that you are aware of when you're alone. Then you have another face which you often put out there in front of other people. So I think it's a combination of your personality, your character, how you want to be portrayed in a public space. That's what I see it just on face value. But of course, ego is so much more complicated than that. It has so many different nuances, so many different areas that it can be looked at from.
The last identification that added to the identification that I have is that ego is a protector.
Yes.
Yeah, I did not think of it that way before, but yes, we all have it, and we all have it to protect parts of ourselves as well.
Okay. Yeah. To me, ego is the feeling you convince yourself to feel and show it to the world. Because that feeling you're giving yourself makes you feel good enough for whatever environment. If we're in this environment, I want to be looked at a certain way. That ego comes out. Different environment, I'm in a different environment. Another ego kind of it's that I call it suits. I'm wearing this suit here. I'm wearing another suit at work. I'm wearing another suit at home if I need. I also think it's a protector. Everything comes from something, and I've read a few articles and research that it starts from the age of 2 or 3. That's when your personality feels like it needs a protector.
The way that I understand it is the ego is the center of consciousness, and it does have a lot to do with, the persona. So basically, the identity or the suits that you wear, those different versions of yourself, it is not it's the thing that causes you to have a persona in the first place. So it's definitely a protection mechanism that's available to you in your consciousness. But the way that I see it is it's more of an identifier. It identifies with things that it likes and it rejects things that it doesn't like. So there's so many different ways that, it kind of, I'm just going to say, expresses itself, and how it protects the true self. So the persona is just one function of the ego.
So we agree on it being a protector.
It's one facet of it.
But do you think that, what do you mean that it comes from, it's the center of consciousness? Because to me, ego is not conscious.
I think it's conscious.
It is conscious.
To me, I think it's conscious.
That's the higher self watching the ego, in my opinion. But the ego itself, when it's, because in my definition, it's when you're identified with the thought. So you can have a thought, you can have like a...
So it doesn't identify mean that it's conscious? Does that make... I don't know if we're kind of on the same wavelength on this.
Yeah, I think you are. I think both of you have a fair enough perspective of it. But in my belief, I think that there are three main components. The ego does not just exist on its own.
It needs all 3.
Yes, so I did some reading in the past, and also when we were in foundational psychology back in school, we learned that there are 3 components within the ego framework. So you have the id, you have the ego, and you have the superego. And what is really interesting about it is that when most of the books explain the ego itself, they show you a picture of an iceberg. So you have the tip of the iceberg, which is right at the top, and then you have the level of the water and everything that's under it, which is much bigger than what it seems. So while you say that the ego is conscious, I think you said it's unconscious. Yeah, while you believe otherwise, according to the definition, it is a combination of both.
That's what I said, that it works on both levels.
Yes. So you have the superego, which is at the bottom, like right beneath the surface, which is completely subconscious and almost even unconscious. Mm-hmm. And then you have the ego, because it interacts with self as well as society as in the people that we surround ourselves. And then you have the superego, which is another component, incredibly important, because we eventually behave against ourselves, that is the id, in order to fulfill societal beliefs.
You said superego.
Sorry,
it's id.
It's id at the bottom. Sorry,
id at the bottom.
Then you have ego and superego at the top. Yeah.
Okay, so the way those words make sense to me is the id is the true self.
Yes, it's the most instinctive, raw self.
Yeah, and then the superego is the way that you function in society with other people, the suits or the persona, and then the ego, obviously. Yeah. But the ego is in charge.
Yes, in a way, and it's also the one that conflicts most with self and external stimuli.
Yes.
So that's why ego is such an interesting topic for all of us, because it almost feels as if that we have this this confusion
The inner
as
conflict.
to the inner conflict with what we think the ego is, because obviously as humans, any normal conscious being is always aware if they're doing something right or they're doing something wrong. You always have this, the good cop, bad cop, the angel, the devil, always telling you what's the difference between right or wrong. So that's what, it's an interesting subject.
Let's wrap it up.
كنا
خليته بالنهاية so Okay, sorry. I was very focused with you. So far if I was a viewer listening to us, we're saying that ego is a good thing. Period. So far.
No, I'm not. I'm saying it's necessary, but it's not good. I look at ego as like a bad parent. So a bad parent is also a good teacher. It's a teacher, it's a friend, but we need to learn from it.
Good. Okay. Bad parent, good teacher,
Yeah.
bad friend.
But good teacher. So you learn, but it's something that, because to me it's unconscious. Maybe there's other layers that are conscious, but to me it's transcending to the conscious by shrinking the ego or being aware of the ego and watching it from like a third point of view.
I don't know. Ever since I started reading, when like preparing for this topic, now everything happening around me, I'm like, was that ego-driven, Suleiman? Did you do that because of your ego? Did you say like everything? I know it's not, yani, but I think there are a lot of stuff we do or say comes from ego. We just don't realize it. ودائما لما كنت deep يعني. No. I have to because. Okay. So. Well,
The way he drops it, like
Every time.
هذا لازم في التيزر please. هذا لازم. So during my reading as well, as Suleiman, I was always confused between ego and pride, and we kind of talked about it the other day شوية على الخفيف, and I also talked with some friends long ago. I did some reading on ego versus pride. What's the difference between them? Most of the research, they say it's a very thin line between pride and ego. Some of them say they're absolutely the opposite. What do you guys think? Pride and ego.
I think pride is part of the
I remember
ego.
you saying that. Yeah, I remember you saying that pride comes under ego, right?
Because the ego is a huge facet of your personality. Pride is not. Pride is like an attribute. It's as a result of you being involved in your ego. These are the outputs. Do you know what I mean? So you have, like we were talking a little bit about like the 7 sins, for example, and the virtues. All of these things come as different outputs from your personality, depending on how you function, depending on the cluster of thoughts that you have, your emotions.
I don't know.
Because there's pride.
For the viewer, I want more examples to understand. If someone never heard the word ego before, how would you
To me,
give like a clear example?
ego يعني.
أيوة.
To me, ego has a lot to do with comparison. To me, and that's why again, ego versus pride. So ego is the feel of being superior to others, or even to someone, right? Bigger, better, more beautiful, smarter, whatever. This comes from ego, even if it's true. Pride is I'm smart, I'm good looking, I'm doing well, I'm healthy, without comparison. This is just me. You do you. I'm good.
I don't think that's.
That's why I'm proud of myself
there-
for these
No,
things, but I'm not.
You're healthy compared to who?
I'm
You're
healthy.
intelligent compared to who?
No, I'm healthy. I'm feeling good. I feel healthy.
But I think
I'm
pride, sorry, but I think pride comes from, I think pride is a degree of egotism, like we talked about. So, for instance, if you say, I'm very healthy, I'm the healthiest one in the room, I'm better than everyone.
If you say healthiest,
He-
that's ego because you're
No,
comparing now.
maybe it's even factual. Maybe you are essentially the fittest person in the room.
But
But
Based on
you're comparing now.
Yes. So, for instance, yeah, if I'm comparing myself to other people in the room, if I have an inflated sense of belief that, yes, I am better than everybody, I am fitter than everybody else, and everybody else in the room disagrees with you, then you are very egoistic. So, you are very proud. If, for instance, everybody in the room came over to you and told you that, okay, yes, you are fit enough, but not as fit as the others in the room, you might be wrong, and you say, okay, I guess you're right, it means that you are more balanced. You're not very egoistic and discarding everybody else's opinion in the room.
I think this
I
is
just
why
think it's a degree.
this is why we don't agree when you think that it's negative and it's a bad parent. I think that it's important because those degrees do exist.
It's a bad parent, but it's like a bad parent. So if you have a bad parent, you can still learn from them. I don't mean
Yes.
it's a bad parent. That is a good teacher.
I still don't agree with that because I think that despite the fact that you might think that there is negative sides, there's also good that comes with it. And without the ego, you would not have any sense of identity. Manar would be without an identity. You literally wouldn't have any favorites, you wouldn't have any specific attributes. You would basically be more like what monks are trying to do. Without an identity.
Detached.
Yeah.
Detached from the world.
Complete detachment. This is the reason why we get
What
into
you're tag me on this monk.
yeah, like I'm just like, dude, yani, to what extent? I don't want to be a monk. I don't want to be completely detached from reality totally. I understand that sometimes we have conflated ourselves with our ego, and it's so intertwined that you can't even take any distance between yourself and being able to recognize that right now you're letting your ego fly to the point where you're creating all of these different levels between you and other people.
But also, I think Manar is a really important point of awareness. I think what's incredibly important is to know that your ego is working or is in play.
Yeah.
So I think that's what makes us conscious beings,
Yeah,
you know?
it's
So
watching it.
Yeah. So when you are aware that you might be acting like a horrible person or you are extra nice, if you are able to tell the degrees to which you're the way you function, I think it's nice. It's easier to tame your ego in that way. I think we talked about tame. When you know how important a role it plays in your life.
I think going back into this conversation, I think we all recognize that we're speaking about it in very broad terms. It took a very long time for each one of us to come to an understanding of what the ego is, what we mean when we talk about sense of identity or even true self. I think maybe that's where we should start. Talking about what the true self is and then kind of talking about all of these other things that happen surrounding it.
Hold on.
I think talking about the true self is you mentioned id. Is that the true self? Can you tell us a bit more about the id?
I think the id is our basic instinct, which is food, water, shelter, procreation. So that's how we are brought into this world, to have these basic needs that have to be met in order for us to survive. as we go along and satisfy all these different aspects, that is, eat a decent meal, drink enough water, procreate, etc., then we then have the time to focus on self. So then we branch into who am I? What is my purpose here? What am I doing? I'm not merely just eating, sleeping, drinking.
That's where the ego comes in.
That's where the ego comes in, which is an addition to who you are as
Right.
as a human being.
Right.
Of course, like we discussed this before, maybe even animals have their own sense of identities, but they also have the basic instinct to survive. So I feel our ego is meant to guide us, okay? Obviously, it is with relation to our stimulus, so nature itself, as well as the people that we are surrounded with. But we also take some time to have conflicting thoughts with our ego because we are self-examining. Do you know what I mean? So others are examining us and we are very aware of that. We are examining ourselves, making sure that we are being perceived in a certain way. And the other aspects come much later. So if you, for instance, now you are at a phase where you recognize your ego, you're very aware that I will have to let go of X, Y, Z in order to move towards this feeling, means it's a work in progress. So awareness is the most important aspect to ego, according to me.
Okay. Close your eyes. Should we go into the exercise?
Okay.
Exercise?
Yep.
Oh.
Okay. Let's get that.
I forgot about this, by the way.
Oh, everyone's doing it. Okay. All right. Imagine you're sitting in a room with your closest parent, the one you're closer to, with your current mentality, with your current mindset. And your parent is talking to your younger sibling and telling them not to do the things they're doing or say the things they're saying to not end up like you.
Shit.
I feel like you did this on purpose. Okay.
This is
Fine.
Okay, sorry. That was good. That was
Very
good.
much.
So that feeling, that emotion, you can open your eyes now. That feeling and that emotion that came up,
That's ego?
that's ego. It's trying to protect you. It's trying to tell you that. Oh my god! This wasn't my exercise, by the way. It was my therapist. And so that trigger, it's trying to protect you and tell you that you need that validation or you can't be compared to be less than a person. And it's trying to...
The feeling I was feeling was, I was curious. Why? Is that also ego?
Was there a rejection
Not at all.
at the... like?
I'm just curious.
I felt a sense of
more
rejection.
like, what do you mean? Like,
And you don't even have siblings.
I don't even have siblings. No, that's true. I felt the instant urge to defend myself for some reason. Like, what did I do?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a beautiful exercise. That makes a lot of sense.
That was good.
Aww. Beauty.
We talk a lot about setting boundaries. If someone says something or does something and you feel like they've crossed your boundaries, that feeling, is that ego?
I believe any trigger, any reaction to trigger, it comes from ego. Anything, anger, frustration, sadness, excitement, anxiousness.
Is it safe to say that all human beings are ego-driven then?
Yes.
Yes.
So everything is because why I'm asking this is because ego usually has a negative connotation. Then when is ego a good thing, a positive thing, and when is it a negative thing?
I think in so many ways, when we are put in situations where we get to know other people. So, for instance, within our family, you gave a beautiful example of, okay, this person is very egotistical. He is very proud, for instance. I think just the basis of our spiritual journeys, our religion, teaches us to be extremely humble. It's very ingrained in our culture, it's very ingrained in our religion to just be a humble person, do good for others, question your ways, question your choices. So that's why I think, in so many ways, the ego gets such a negative connotation, because ego is seen as the height of pride in terms of how we define ego in spirituality or in Christianity or Islam or any other religions. So when I look at ego, I'm just like, as long as it comes down to the point that when I'm aware of my ego, means I'm on the right path. As long as I'm aware of it, I'm on the right path. There can be days when I have this inflated sense of belief, I'm the perfect person, everybody else around me is nothing. And then there are days where you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, wait a second, I'm not capable of even doing the basics. So I think when you look at egos in terms of degrees, it just has a very it's just like, okay, this is me, this is who I am. There are things that I need to work on. There are things I need to improve on. And then all of a sudden it doesn't become a monster, it suddenly just becomes an aspect of who you are.
I really love how you put that together. Is being humble the opposite of being proud? Can you be humble and proud at the same time?
I think
I
so.
think yes and no.
It's remember when I defined them in my mind, pride and ego. Humble and proud has nothing to do with comparison. I'm humble, I'm good, I'm proud of myself.
Because I think that the word that you were trying to allude to is maybe not humble, maybe it's selfless.
But selfless is a very difficult virtue to have.
It is.
To be selfless
But
is
that's
to be
basic-
metahuman.
But that's what we're taught to do,
Yeah,
right?
that's the goal,
To-
ultimately.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
remove that aspect of you that's anything to do with
Yes.
ego. So
I'll take the example of like saying I'm proud to be Omani. Okay, so I I see that sometimes you can say I'm proud to be Armani, but not attached to that. But when you're attached to your passport, basically,
Right.
because you're comparing it to other
Now it's ego.
nationalities.
Now it's ego.
Now it's ego.
100% معاش.
Okay.
Yeah. When you said that, it reminded me of something. They say sometimes to make yourself feel better, think of people who are less fortunate, and that's actually an exercise people recommend for you to feel better.
But can you just feel better because
Yeah.
you have self-worth that doesn't come from comparing yourself to either less or more?
I think so.
So that it's like having really high self-worth or really low self-worth.
it actually really bothers me,
I know.
It really pisses me off.
This example or this
Think
exercise.
of people who are less fortunate than you.
You'll feel better.
I don't
It
see.
doesn't
I
make
think
you-
yeah,
It's comparison again.
it's comparison again.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying, like the people with really high self-worth or narcissists, self-worth in the meaning of like I deserve everything.
Yes.
Very ego-based, or the very, very low self-worth, like I don't have anything. Oh, I'm so ugly. Oh, with no gratitude whatsoever. Of course, it's so much easier and so much nicer to live in this, and it's than this. But they're all both ego-based. But they're both like a what do you call it? Like a getaway or a segue, or what do you call it? Like an opening to awakening, both of them. But as Eckhart Tolle says, you are way more likely to have that awakening when you're in a prison cell than on a private jet. Because in a private chat, you're way more delusional that
Yeah.
you're okay, actually.
When we sat a few days ago, Muhammad said something. He said, is ego an illusion then? Is it an illusion?
No, he said is happiness an illusion?
No, a few days, Yom Khamis, when we sat, he's like, then is it, because we were saying something like this. He's like, then is it an illusion if it's not?
It's an illusion in our minds.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's an illusion. It's not the word that I would use. I can understand why you would say that it's an illusion, because it's malleable and it can be changed. It's changeable, but it's not an illusion. It's something that exists, because without it you wouldn't have any sense of anything. You would literally just, you would be a body without without any
self.
without any characteristic whatsoever. Nothing would be happening on the inside. You wouldn't be able to like catch anything and build on that as a human being.
By the way, Muhammad is not here today. Muhammad's not here today. He couldn't be here. He'll be back, inshallah, in the next episode. Shout out, Muhammad.
Hey, I got your seat.
Identification examples are like achievements, materials, possessions, positions, looks, knowledge, race. Which under race it comes to color. That's where racism comes from. Wars are built basically. Everyone go there. But so when people look down at other people because of nationality, because of something that they did not even choose. Did you choose your color? Did you choose the way you look? Did you choose to be born in Oman? No. So when you're so, oh my God.
Let's go.
All right. When you're so proud and attached to something that you did not choose, and you look down to people by something they did not choose, how do you explain that?
This is taught. When a baby is born, he does not understand these things. This is taught. It starts in the house, and then you go out and see there are. Now you meet people who have like-minded and like, so this is true. We are better. We have a bigger qabila. I'm Omani. We have so much history. We are better than other countries. My passport is red. My passport is stronger than yours. Right? This is taught. Yeah, a lot of things is taught. Racism is taught. Misogyny is taught. Everything is taught.
And
Right.
it's all ego-based.
It's all ego-based.
But like, where did that start? Because as we said, like, ego starts because it's trying to protect us. So is it like sense of what do you call it? Intima. What's intima? Belonging. Maybe it started as a sense of belonging for survival's sake.
It's about identifying, and it's always trying to group things. First of all, one thing that is important to also highlight about ego is that it's always identifying with things that it already knows. It always wants to see things that has been repeated before. It doesn't like anything that's new. Anything that's new and foreign scares the ego senseless.
Yes. And I think that's also so I think when you differentiate yourself from another person who doesn't look like you, who doesn't speak like you, who doesn't behave like you, I think the instant reaction is to fear that person,
to
and
also
that fear,
categorize it as other.
yes, you want to compartmentalize this person and see him or her based on her worth, based on what she does, the color, of course, religion, etc. So it's most likely, if you see these differences between people, what you really are looking at is how you are more privileged than they are. privilege, of course, is identified. If you are self-aware, if you are not as proud or egotistic as you would say, you are aware that you are privileged. But when you use your privilege in order to stomp on somebody else, assuming that they are of less value than you are, it stems from fear, because you're scared that this person's going to do better than you, is going to do better than your children, is going to somehow take over your livelihood, for instance, or is just going to take over your country, or you know what I mean. So it just comes from fear, and that fear comes from ignorance. So, like you said, when you teach your kids from a very young age that there is essentially nothing different between you and this person, you make them less ignorant. So I just feel like ignorance is so easy to pass down to everyone. And also it comes down to it's also capitalism. If we don't
Razan again.
sorry, if we don't differentiate between this person and this person, how are we going to thrive? So I keep pushing this person down so that I can step on him and keep going higher. And there are so many forms of creating this divide, that it can be based on money, it can be based on race, etc. I don't know, that's at least what I think.
I think it's important to know that you're different.
Yes.
In order, especially, for example, our countries, we have strong traditions and cultures. It's important to know that we're different,
Yes.
just to kind of accommodate to that when we meet each other. But it's the entitlement that bothers me the most. When you meet someone of a different race, the entitlement that you feel, and we sometimes we go through these things when we talk to certain people. Another person would come like, what? ليش مسوي السالفة? Why are you talking to them like that? Are you guys friends? No. Then why are you talking to them like that? Do you get me? It's that deep. It's deep rooted, like that.
Or another example is that when, and I've seen this happen, like when an expat talks back to an Omani person, the reaction is like, how dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you? What do you mean, how dare you?
When you started it.
How dare you? Or like
God.
the sass,
Yeah.
or I told you so, or ego-based, because it comes from I know better.
I feel like this would be a nice way to segue into talking about what's the word again? Projections, and how that's a huge part of the ego, how it projects ideas. And okay, so basically, what is a projection? A projection is when the ego recognizes something within itself but cannot fathom and cannot deal with it within themselves. So they project that idea onto another person so that it's easier for them to deal with it, talk about it. Sometimes a projection isn't even in that other person. That other person might not even possess it.
Yeah.
But the ego recognizes it within themselves, and because it's bubbling up, this is the only way that it can deal with it. And all of a sudden now it becomes easy for me to like yell at you, to put you down, to conflate it. But equally there's another side of projection where it might not even be something that's in you currently. It might have been something that used to be in you, that you've already dealt with, that you've already
Went through.
something that you've worked on already. But because you see that projected onto so you see somebody else acting in that way, that all of a sudden you feel like this is a teaching moment for you, where you're just like, no, don't do that because I know better, or whatever,
Same thing with the advice thing.
And it triggers
I
you.
recognize
That's what I was
so much
trying.
in myself, that because I'm comparing knowledge with other people, so I think I know better, and I become the teacher, like, oh, now I'm so spiritual and I know all this spiritual. Even that comes from ego, like I'm so yoga. And like I try to teach the other person, or I try to like, this is what ego is, right? You have to learn about ego.
Yeah.
But it's
Sometimes
all
you don't
ego-based.
mean. Sometimes you don't need to give advice or lecture. One thing I've learned. When someone close to you comes to you to vent or something, is to ask. I've tried this a couple of times. Is to ask, do you want me to listen to you or do you want me to give you advice? Right? Because a lot of times, honestly, I'm gonna be honest. Us men, we do this a lot.
I mean,
We
mansplain.
mansplain. Yeah.
What's man's thing?
Not
Mansplain.
mansplain. That's explaining in a man's
Like very
mentality, right?
derogatory, yeah.
No. Advice. I'm talking about advice. So someone comes and vents, and I thought I'll start advising or giving solutions. We were big on solutions, that fixing stuff.
It's so masculine to want to end things,
Right,
and then any problem.
right.
let's
To
Well-
resolve, yeah.
resolve. Yeah.
When sometimes they just need someone to listen, right? Yeah.
That's a really important point, but I just wanted to speak about mansplaining for a second. So mansplaining is basically when a woman starts explaining something and then a man takes over and explains exactly what she just said, or he just cuts her off and then completes. Sometimes I mansplain, by the way. I'm not going to say that it's just
I like how
other
you're
people.
talking directly.
You know, I'm just talking to all of you men out there, like, stop mansplaining. We know what we're talking about.
مقصود.
You know?
Okay, so we were trying to cover ourselves recognizing ego within ourselves, right? And then as a solution, we touched on taming our ego. How do you go about that? Or how did you go about that?
I think just growing up generally, because I have the single child syndrome. So I always grew up being the light of my parents' eyes. Nothing is wrong with me. I'm incredibly perfect in every way. And then I grew up and I went out into the real world and I realized, wait a second. There are hundreds, in fact, thousands, millions who are even much better than you. So I think that disconnect I had from myself took some time to get used to, but I think it was great in a way, because when I went to college, I met so many beautiful people. I was just like, okay, cool. There's so many facets to everybody's personalities, and that I should learn more from different cultures, from different people, different ideologies, only so that I can be a better person. But of course, it's not always like that. Sometimes you do believe that you are actually better than everybody else. It just happens once in a while. You have these. I did not see it until I delved into my romantic relationships. That's when I really realized that, wait a second, I really do think that I'm better than this other person. And this person is someone I love. This is someone I care about. This is somebody I have decided to spend a portion of my life with. So, like, there is a saying that if you listen long enough, you can see the opposite person snitching on themselves. So when I had this awakening, this very rude awakening, that Dee, you are the problem here. You know, it's obviously very difficult to come to terms with. But all it took was for my partner to just say, Dee, I did not do this. And then when I went back in time and I realized that, okay, this is what I do when I'm cornered, when I'm put into a corner, my ego gets this, it
Tries to protect you.
tries to protect me, and also I become incredibly delusional. I'll do anything to be right in this scenario, where in fact I should just like put my guns down, or I don't know, put my arms down and just be like, okay, I messed up here. I need to. And that comes with time, I guess. In the beginning, everybody's all up in your business, with any relationship for that matter. I'm not just talking about romantic ones. But when I think you let go, you you stop reacting to the things that you're so attached to, Of course, this is all in theory. It's easier said than done. It's a work in progress. Every day we try our best to work towards this. But I think that's why attachment comes into play, and we are so attached to our bad qualities because it's so much easier to just be a bad person. I think being a good person is so hard. You know,
Takes work.
it takes work, and we are all people pleasers. In some way or the other, culture has taught us to be people pleasers. So I just feel like that was a rude awakening for me. Of course, my journey with yoga also helped a lot, but just my interpersonal relationships is where I learned most about how inflated my ego was in general.
That's something I read a long time ago. When you said that when they put you on a corner and you tried your best to come across right or win the argument, right? There's something called sign language. Have you heard of it?
No, I'm not.
Sign language
Sign
or
language.
body language?
Sign language, SIGN. So when you're put on a corner and you are, خلاص, you want to look good. You want to get out of this in a good way. So you will use one of the letters, like SIGN. S for shame. So you will say something to shame them. I, insult. G, instill guilt in them. And the last one is the need to be right. So sign language. Yeah. This also comes from ego, right? Yeah. Yeah.
What you said, the clearest time I saw my ego or it came up was in my marriage. And I believed that it was a mirror. I still somehow believe that you're kind of mirroring each other's energies, but being triggered by whatever the other person says is projection from what's actually inside. So if I'm telling my partner, you're wasting too much time on your phone, or you're playing too many video games, it's because I am wasting actually my time. Yeah. But I'm being triggered by what he's doing.
Yeah.
So and then I need to like reflect and chill, basically. Another thing is that's why I believe that any trigger or any reaction, like fast reaction, comes from ego. So when someone insults you, your instinct wants to
React.
sass back to them.
Yeah.
Or I'll show you, you're that and that.
Yeah.
But it's harder to actually stay still and maintain whatever trigger is in there, and just, we have a saying that in Al-Quran, so وَإِذَا خَاطَبْهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. So if the ignorant people talk to you, you just say peace be upon you. And I think that comes from the higher self.
And leave. Leave there.
And that's so hard. That's so
Yeah,
hard.
that's
hard.
harder
It is.
than just,
Because you need
saying
to
what you have
win.
to say.
You need to win, right?
Yeah. And I catch myself so many times. I'm just
Yeah.
like, okay, D, just don't say this. Try. Just don't say this. Walk away. But then I don't know. It's just your mind. It's anger. It's just that you feel satisfied only when you have the last word. And it's so sad because you just 15 minutes later or maybe more, you're just like, damn, I just wish I didn't say that. Because
Exactly.
that digs a bigger hole for your relationship in general, whether it's your family, your co-workers, whatever. It did not have to be said at all. So
That's
what
for
about
sure.
yourself? Like, how have you?
The example I'm thinking about is I was not always very good at communicating, especially expressing my feelings. Especially when it's negative feelings, right? Good feelings is very easy.
Yeah.
Negative feelings, as in when I'm mad, when I'm angry, when I'm scared, you'll not hear me say anything. So I've had few friendships where I tried to resist doing that, expressing how I felt in certain situations, they did not take that. Like, nah, you're either real in the good and in the bad, or this is no.
Why was it difficult for you?
I don't know. I never did that since I was a kid. I never did that. But growing up, it made sense, more and more sense, that every time I did that, there's this sense of guilt later, feeling like, did I leave that conversation? Did I leave them in a bad mood? Is this a burden now? Are they thinking? Are they worried about me? I don't like that feeling. So to me, how I'm wired is, I'll figure it out. I'll fix what needs to be fixed, and then when it's done, I can come back to you and tell you what happened, how I dealt with it, how I fixed it, and that's it.
Listen,
But
I feel like if you took a step back and actually dealt with your feelings, and then you came into whoever
yeah,
you're talking to and then explained them, from
that's what
that's the
I
opposite of ego.
that's what I
How
want
I
to
see.
do.
Okay.
But the thing is, I understand where they're coming from, because if you don't, in that, let's say it takes me a week, right, to analyze and figure out how I felt and why I felt it. In those time, are you going to be the normal Manar? Probably not, right? It won't show. Maybe it'll be very subtle, but something will show. You're acting different.
You mean
You're talking differently. You're maybe distant or something. That hurts people.
okay?
When out of nowhere, suddenly you're being distant. No explanation, no nothing. So that's when I had to, just like you said, look myself in the mirror and said, okay, Sleiman, get it together. It's difficult, but do something about it. So a solution for people who find this difficult to do as well is, go to the person. You don't have to say everything, but communicate, as in, tell them, I don't have it figured out right now. I don't know why I'm feeling and why. Let me get back to you, just in case you noticed something.
Yeah, let me process this.
Let me process this. Give me time. Give me space. I'll come back to you. Usually appreciate it.
In the break, we talked about ego death, and I want to know what's your definition of it.
I think there was a time in my life where I felt like I needed to go through an ego death. It sounds very different to you, and I think that's the reason why I feel a bit apprehensive about sharing, because maybe my reasons for doing it was a little bit different, in the sense that, okay, so
What is ego death? How do you define it?
I feel like I want to try and share the instance that I'm thinking about, and then explain it, because it's not coming to me right now. So I think we spoke a bit about this, like in the last episode, about how I don't wear makeup especially when I'm on like social media. And this started as a conscious choice when I was in uni. So very similar. When I went out into the world, I realized that I had a very inflated sense of self, and that there was a reason for that. I still can't really tell you exactly like the reason that it was there. I guess it's definitely to do with protection, but I thought that I was a lot stronger than I actually was. So I had to start trying to get along with people that are from completely different backgrounds from me, that come from different kinds of family dynamics. And I started to realize that I had a really, really difficult time acclimating to these different spaces. And for that reason, I eventually fell into like a really deep depression, as well as me dealing with a lot of things that were suppressed for a very long time, coming out all of a sudden because I had so much time to think and reflect.
What made it difficult to adjust to the new environment?
Because I had a very inflated sense of self. I really thought that I could handle anything, that I was the shit. You know, I really thought that everything was going to be a breeze, because when I was younger, I just managed to find it in myself. I had this extra sense of power, and I don't know where it always came from. And all of a sudden now, because I'm in the real world and I'm not in that incubator, you know, where all of the right conditions are set for me, from my family, from the people that I know, from my school, from my background. I'm not in that safe space anymore, that I actually had to see myself for
That's
the
why
first
it doesn't
time.
like change.
It does not like change. So I think the first, let's say it happened in so many different stages. The first stage was recognizing that I was a very surface person. Like, a lot of the way that I felt about myself actually did not come from any sort of depth whatsoever. And the first part that fell away was this idea of me feeling like, I don't even know how to talk about this, it's so weird. But I was very focused on the way that I looked, okay? It got so out of control that I used to sleep with my makeup on, and I used to sleep with hair extensions, because I felt like I needed to look a certain way, because that was my only form of protection, because there was nothing else that was tethering me to any sort of like my true self. I didn't even know what my true self was, and I think this is when I first started to grapple with a lot of these ideas. And one of the reasons why I was just like, let's try to talk a little bit more in depth about what all of these different facets are, because it took me like maybe 10 years to really understand and grapple with ideas of there being a true self, because I did not know what that looked like. And me being depressed for a long time had a lot to do with that, because I didn't really know how to get in touch with the real me. Everything was always on the surface. I also studied fashion. I mentioned that. And I quit at some point, because I started to realize that, you know, the reason that I chose to study fashion in the first place is because, again, it just affirmed this surface aspect of myself, and looking into the industry and what it perpetuates and what it serves, it completely went against everything that I actually believed in, once I sat with myself long enough to realize that actually that's not it. That's not what I want to be about.
So I think everybody goes through this egotistical state.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, when you pull back an arrow so you can let it go, it's that pull back so you can jump, and like the further you're pulled back, the further you go.
So I guess I still don't know how to like put the definition of an ego death succinctly, but the way that I understood it is to completely remove myself of all of the shackles of ideas of who I thought I was, and how I looked at the world, how I placed people, and I kind of went back to bare basics of I'm just a living, breathing human being, and there is nothing that puts me at a rank above anybody else and anybody else's experience.
Are we getting into bullying now? الإنسان طبعا
Who bullied who? Are you the bullier? Or did you get bullied?
I think I was the bullier in a sense. I always knew that عندي ظهر. I have people behind me. And
What age are we talking about?
whole childhood. I know I had people يعني لما كنا نحن بس I know my brothers يثرب حارب done no questions
Bodyguards.
bodyguards هنا نفس الشيء. I know that nobody could actually cross me because they knew that I had people. So sometimes I went كذا I poked as a child. So I would
What did you poke?
I would
With
poke.
what?
I would cross. I would say stuff
Provoking.
just to provoke and see if they react to it, and then what what you know?
What you gonna do now?
Yeah.
The most thing that men are attached to, or their ego is attached to, is their strength. And for women, it's their looks. That's why we get really triggered by looks, and that's why men love to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite.
Sure.
I think that I was definitely the bullier. I did not bully too many people. I bullied a few, but I remember them. And I've been asking myself lately, like, why I did that. I mean, other than the people that live in my house. Because that was definitely, with my sister, it's definitely competition and projection, maybe. I don't know. I can't really pinpoint when it's when you're young. I don't know. I think everyone needs to go through that.
Yeah.
We you don't really know.
You need to go through that ego state and then realize. But in high school, I definitely made someone cry, and I don't know. Yeah, but I did. It made me feel superior, in a way, and I had to look deep within to find, why did I need to feel superior? What was I lacking to use someone else as a step to go higher?
I hate this. I was both. When I was much younger, I was bullied, and then after I changed schools, I became the bully, but I was more of a protective bully, where I know what it feels like for somebody to constantly make fun of the way that you look, just like the class that you belong to, all sorts of things. It's to the point where like kids can be so mean and make fun of you because of your shoes.
Kids are mean.
They're so mean. Like, I don't know how, like. But yeah, so I can't really go into too many details because I don't remember a lot of that stuff. A lot of these things I've forgotten since then. Similar to you, I know that I bullied my sister when we were young. I'm sorry, I love you. Can we be friends now? But yeah.
For me, I think I grew up as a very timid child. So I was bullied because I was a very small, tiny, slow child. But then I think as I grew up and I got into secondary school, middle school, and then senior school, I think I was so traumatized by being bullied. I started becoming a bully, just like you said. And the worst part is, like, I still felt like a victim. I was like, no, I'm the one who's being bullied. This person, but I used to. It was really, I said mean things in high school to women, to guys. Stirred a lot of hate. Of course, that's a part of growing up. Very negative, of course, but I remember it very clearly. But I think the issue was with the coping mechanism. So I think when you're bullied as a child, from a very young age, it doesn't matter whether it's family or it's in school or it's your playmates. I think when you are in that age, you are such a sponge. You're absorbing all these things. It kind of it's a stepping stone for who you become as you grow up. So I think if you're not taught that, of course, we would never tell our parents that, yes, I bullied this child. They wouldn't know that we were the problem in so many ways. But I think as you grow up, you realize the persons you have hurt. Sometimes, I don't know, if they're on Facebook, I've just said sorry to them. Or some of them still hate my guts because they still think I'm a horrible person. Or sometimes you try to clear the air if you see them many years from now. But I think moving on from being bullied to becoming a bully um, is is something that really needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
So when you see children who seem to be like bullies, it's a very important time to try to correct them or to see why they are so wounded to wound another person in the first place. And they often become very egotistic people as they grow up, or they have a rude realization and then they become humble as pies.
Yeah, it's the bulliers at school actually.
Yeah, why are they so hurt?
That grow up mostly as narcissists.
Yeah.
We spoke about solution, taming down. If your ego is somewhere here, what if your ego is somewhere here? What do you do?
You mean like the really low self-loathing sort of
Yeah.
ego? To me, it's the same. What worked for me is like the same.
Taming the
It's the same thing that whenever this feeling comes up of I'm horrible or I don't want to go out because I look a certain way or I'm so poor I got nothing. Whenever that feeling comes up and you want to act on it, just take a moment between that and create space between that feeling and the action. So whenever you do that and you don't react on the action, it shrinks the ego. And the other side as well, like if you want to insult.
People are in a hurry today.
If you get triggered and you're angry or you want to bully someone or shame someone or whatever sign, shame someone, insult or how that, again, take a step back, just take a moment and create space between wanting to react immediately and doing so. Just that small space and small pause. Whenever you do it, it just shrinks. Watch yourself.
That's my thoughts for today. Honestly, it's been a couple of hours.
Yeah, we have a bit over an hour and a half.
Over an hour and a half. How happy are you guys with this?
I think we covered a lot of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of things were covered, and also the conversation leading up to today with myself. When you all told me about the subject, it just really struck me that there's so many layers to our personalities, and the idea is just to look. There's no other way but to just look at yourself. I know it's easier said than done, but sometimes it's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
Just be true to yourself, sit with yourself. I don't think we get enough time to do that anymore, to just sit and reflect. But then when you kind of picture your flaws or just have an idea of what they are, you just automatically smile, you feel better, you're honest with yourself.
And every trigger is actually an opportunity to take the ego from the front driver and put it back and have the higher self as the driver.
Any thoughts, Aisha?
I think that understanding the ego will definitely change your life. It's definitely changed mine. I think there's no way that we can say that we've covered everything on this particular subject. I wish we spoke a little bit more about shadow work and how to do the self-analysis, but maybe we can talk about that some other time. But just to echo what you guys said, that really just catch yourself when you're doing something that's egotistical and that in no way, shape, or form is it easy. It's very painful.
Yeah.
but sometimes there's something like there's good pain and there's bad pain.
Yeah.
And I think it's good pain.
It's
But also
it's-
sometimes we shouldn't be that hard on ourselves, because then that's you're inflicting yourself through
It's, you know,
with pain.
when you say like we shouldn't be hard on ourselves, I think that people are hard on themselves in a way, but they're very soft on themselves when it comes to certain aspects. Because okay, basically as soon as they start to like watch themselves and they start to see the thing that they're doing, the observation is where the pain comes from, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, don't act in pain, don't act from the place of pain, but watch yourself and allow yourself to completely feel the pain of what it is that you're constantly like doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that pain is so important, because that's the thing that's going to be transformative, not you putting yourself down and saying that you're a bad person. There's no point in that. That's actually just a waste of time.
Yeah.
I think it's a continuous work. We will always, if you put enough effort and work, you will always try to recognize ego within yourselves. All right. Thank you, Deepali, for being here. Thank you for accepting our invitation. This was I enjoyed this a lot today.
Yes, me too.
Honestly.
It's a
All
great
right.
crew as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
Come back again.